Everybody, thank you for joining. It's 6 Eastern, and we were going to talk to Rick Grenell, the Trump foreign policy advisor, tonight, but we decided that would be flying in the face of a massive story. So pleased to have you join to talk about the Trump guilty verdict. As all of you know, guilty on all counts. And I'm going to run through what I know at this hour about what's transpired since the guilty verdicts and what's coming up. Have some great folks to join us in a conversation. I'm watching cable news here out of the corner of my eye. If we see something interesting there, we'll flip over and watch together, as we do. If you see something interesting on social media, we'd love you to raise your hand and share that with us. And before too long, we'll be taking your questions, your comments, so you can be prepared to do that. As always, we'd love you on camera and muted, unless you raise your hand and get called on to participate. We want to take as many of your questions as possible, and we'll do that. Tim Hogan, Lauren Leader are here, and we're going to hear from them in just a moment. Guilty on all counts. As far as I know, we've not heard from any jurors so far. The judge, as is customary, met with the jurors after they rendered their verdict, and I suspect told them they didn't need to talk. My theory all along has been conviction most likely, because no one who lives in Manhattan wants to be known as the person who hung Donald Trump's jury and kept there from being a conviction. We'll see if any of that's in play. We find out. Donald Trump spoke as he left court. A motorcade shortly thereafter left for Trump Tower, I believe, to Trump Tower. He said nothing surprising. He said exactly kind of the greatest hits of what you've heard all along from him when he's spoken about a rigged system and an unfair trial and an unfair venue. He also said that the real decision will be rendered on Election Day. The Biden campaign put out a statement which also said the same thing. This will be decided on Election Day, and we'll talk about the politics of all that, of course. Sentencing is going to occur after the presidential debate, 4 days before the Republican convention. That's obviously quite an interesting set of timing, and to the extent that one side is winning the spin wars by then, that could either be a disaster for Donald Trump or rocket fuel. Fox is reporting that the Trump campaign donation page and WinRed, the vehicle by which Republicans give to candidates, have both crashed. I don't know that that's true. I do know Fox reported it. And in sampling opinion from the left and the right, I've heard nothing surprising so far. Democrats are basically saying the system worked. Donald Trump is a convicted felon, trying not to be gleeful, which is kind of the marching orders from the high command of the Democratic Party. I've been surprised maybe a little bit. Republican reaction so far has been a little bit of furor, but more quiet confidence. And that could be spin or delusion, or it could be what they really think, which is they don't think this is going to hurt Donald Trump. Most pollsters and public opinion experts, strategists I've talked to, do not expect this to revolutionize the polls. And of course, it's a manifestation of the extraordinary phenomena that is Donald Trump, that the conventional wisdom is that a guy who is now a convicted felon, some say technically not convicted felon until he's sentenced, but a guy who's been convicted of a lot of felonies by a jury, people don't assume that his poll numbers will collapse, and in fact, many say they will not. We shall see. Michael Cohen is scheduled to be on MSNBC tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. They're touting that as an exclusive. I've spent time with Michael Cohen when he was very happy. I suspect the level of euphoria will be high. You can tune in for that. So that's what I know. I got cable on here. We may watch together some of it. As I also said, please let me know if you've got anything that you see that you want to talk about on social media or cable that I miss. So first I want to bring in Tim Hogan, Democratic strategist, Lauren Leader, and Aimee Parnes, all part of our two-way family, and start with Lauren and then kick it around. Lauren, what's your sense of not why this happened, but what happens next? What are you thinking is going to happen next, or what are you looking for next?
Know something is possible, and then to actually experience it in real time is different. It definitely kind of hits like a ton of bricks somehow. I think
I totally agree with you. I agree with you. There's a breathlessness to it.
Like just colossal moment in American history, and bad, good, it's hard to even completely parse that. And I think, those of us who do this, commentating, there are times where like there's almost you got to take a minute and just absorb what's just happened. It's been less than a half an hour or less than an hour since the verdict. One thing you missed in the summary of Trump's, frankly beleaguered looking rant when he came out. I mean, he looked like he also had the wind absolutely knocked out of him. He definitely looked demoralized in a way that, one would hope you would be if you've just been convicted of 34 felonies. But he also blamed George Soros. So he never misses the chance to blame Soros, which to me is also like a deeply anti-Semitic screed. It's part of a long-standing project to blame Soros and the wealthy Jews for animating his demise, and I think that can't be missed because he never, because he did say that today. And then, on the bigger piece of this, I think no one should be gloating, not because there are moments of people who wanted justice, and they are getting some of it. If you feel that, as you said, it's divided very deeply by left and right. I also just have to take a moment for Stormy Daniels, because while Michael Cohen will be all over the airwaves, I wrote a piece a year ago entitled "Stormy Daniels, Feminist Hero?" because it was before the E. Jean Carroll verdict. And you got to take a minute to recognize that the two people at the center of Trump's deepest woes are two women who he discounted, who he dismissed, who he denigrated, and they've had their day.
Yep.
Both E. Jean in terms of the, in colossal verdict, and then, and then now today, this is really Stormy Daniels' verdict. It's really her moment in a lot of ways. And of course, Alvin Bragg, but I hate that Stormy gets lost in all of this, because what she did was pretty extraordinary.
Thank you for that. Aimee, what do you think?
I think that nothing has changed. And that is what I think a lot remains to be seen. Obviously, we do need to take a breath. We need to kind of digest what's happening. But I think, as I've always said, that this trial, we are in May, almost June. The polls, people the polls starting in September, mailing in their ballots in September, go to the polls in November. It's a long way away. I don't think that this will change much. The question is whether it changes the people at the margins, if there is enough of those people who say, you know what, I'm not so comfortable voting for a convicted felon. I'm not so comfortable with the Republican leadership at this point. But I still think that when it comes down to the economy or a trial, people are going to vote their pocketbooks.
All right, Tim, what do you think?
Mark, you and Aimee just taking the nothing matters here approach.
Oh, I didn't
30 minutes after a historic...
No. I didn't say nothing matters. I didn't say
but
that. I think it could hurt his poll numbers. I don't think it'll devastate his poll numbers.
What I will agree with you on is I don't think it's going to be an earthquake in poll numbers. I think this whole campaign is going to be a game of inches, and we'll see how it plays out, and we'll see if voters actually move. But I think we've seen indications up until this point that getting a guilty verdict, him being a convicted felon, would matter to a significant portion of the electorate. There was a NPR PBS NewsHour poll that came out yesterday that 17% said a guilty verdict would make them less likely to vote for Trump. Small portion, but still matters. Early in May, we had Navigator Research come out with a poll saying that only 36% of voters expected a conviction here. So while we can talk about how this was somewhat of a foregone conclusion, it was happening in New York, we thought this was going to happen, many of Americans did not think that this was going to happen. And I will say this is one of those moments, we get few moments where there's news that really breaks through to low information voters who are, trending a little bit more Trump in this period. And this is a moment that will break through for them. And I think it is something that will stalk Trump, as you mentioned, through the entirety of his campaign. He's got sentencing and other things that are going to punctuate the calendar in these key moments. So I agree, there's so much to be seen. But I think this is a disaster for him. I think this is incredibly
Tim, I'm not predicting or prejudging, but I wanted to ask you this. When would you expect to see a change in Trump's standing?
Yeah,
I'm
going to say the next poll that comes out on Monday, and he'll gain 12 points, and then I'll never come back on the show.
Right, but that will have been fielded a week and a half ago.
Well, no,
so.
I mean, I think people were poised to do polls. I know of at least one place poised to do a poll. So I think you'll see polls by the weekend, by Sunday. Yeah. Would you expect to see a change in the horse race on Sunday?
I think I would expect to see a little bit of movement, and I would be curious to see what questions are asked and how much that affects leaners and whether or not it's a deal breaker for them. We've seen independents talk about it. We also saw in a lot of the exit polling in the GOP primary, between 30 and 40% when we had, better polling in some of the early states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, also Virginia and North Carolina, that those voters were also a block of people concerned about a conviction. So it's hard to pin down and say, we're going to see movement immediately.
Yeah.
But it's something that's also like drip, drip, drip coverage that's going to stalk him for the rest of the campaign.
It would be the damnedest thing if Biden went up 8 in the next round of polls, wouldn't it? Would be the damnedest thing.
I don't think anyone would expect that. And by the way, New Yorker here, I did not expect it. I didn't. And I didn't because, I think that, I really feel for the jury. I mean, they clearly, have we all done jury duty? We've all done jury duty. This is, to have that kind of weight on the pressure, the stress of that, the anxiety about your personal safety, all of those things, we really should all just take a moment to be grateful for these men and women who served, because it is a really high, it's a high calling in a sense in our democracy that we get this jury of our peers, and the burden on them was enormous. And I was not sure at all. I definitely did not. I thought yesterday listening to the closings, I thought, I don't know, there's just too many things that this is such a huge thing to do. Will they be able, will they have the courage? Will they be able to face what this really means? And so I give them a lot of credit. I did want to just read one tweet that I thought was pretty powerful, which if the Biden campaign is not reusing over and over and over again, shame on them. It's Bill Pascrell, and he does this sort of list. Trump, felon. Campaign chair, felon. Deputy campaign chair, felon. Personal lawyer, felon. Chief strategist, felon. National security advisor, felon. Trade advisor, felon. Foreign policy advisor, felon. Campaign fixer, felon. Company CFO, felon. Currently in jail.
Who's the chief strategist who's a felon? I don't know who that one is. Amy, you know who that is? Who would that be?
Who's that?
I don't know.
Bannon. Is it Bannon?
Yeah.
Bannon.
Good.
Bannon.
Michael Smerconish, what do you wonder? What are you currently wondering?
I feel too close to it because I'm so far in the weeds wondering, how did these misdemeanors for which the statute of limitations had run get elevated to felony status? And I need to be reminded, it's too easy to assume that everybody else has been in the weeds. And I think for most, it's a case of first impression, and that this will now be a head turner to cause many people to say, wait a minute, what just happened? And why has he been adjudicated a convicted felon? I don't think I would believe whatever those polls say in the next couple of days. I would answer your question by saying not until closer in time to that first debate on the 27th are we really going to know where this thing stands. And what do I most want to see? I'm very curious to see. I know President Biden has already put out a statement. I want to see how he handles it, because if I were advising him, and I'm not, I think restraint would be the word of the day. If he's seen, or if the people are close to him are seen as gleeful, I think it could end up having tremendous blowback. I would be most interested to get off of this Zoom and go knock on the doors of my neighbors, assuming they would be honest with me, because how this plays in the burbs, particularly among suburban women, that's what I would most like to see.
That's a question about the media. This will obviously be wall to wall for the next 24 hours, and will be on your program Saturday morning and into the weekend. Next week, by Monday, with the sentencing several weeks away, will this be still the main story on national and local news or not?
If you're asking me, the answer is yes. I've already blown up my Saturday show.
No, I'm talking about Monday. I'm saying Monday. This will sustain into the weekend, I'm certain. But will this be the dominant story next week or not?
Okay, what
on MSNBC it will.
I don't know who said that, but that beat me to the punch. I was going to say, what channel am I watching? That's the answer.
Yeah.
How about Channel 7 in Milwaukee? Will they
No.
No.
Agreed.
Has it been on the front of the Journal Sentinel to the extent that we've seen it in the Post and the Times? No.
Yeah.
I think there's a degree to which, though, it's going to get baked into the coverage, right? It's a little bit like the Biden age issue, where it's like, we'll approach any conversation we need to have, and also, can we remind you that he's 82 years old, right? And I think that is part of this that is going to be a drum that's going to be beaten. That's problematic for Donald Trump. It is maybe not the headline in every local news story, and local news is probably not going to call him a felon or a convict, but it will seep in coverage in a lot of different ways.
Talk about baked in. I think nothing changes as far as people's perception of Donald Trump today. I think everything that people know about Donald Trump, he faced 2 impeachments. There were multiple things. It didn't move the needle. That's the thing. And that's what we have yet to learn. We all think that these big moments are going to shift in some way. And yet people in New York are living their lives. People in Milwaukee are living their lives. No real person is sitting here watching CNN right now. And that's the thing. And that's what I think my big takeaway is from 2016 and 2020 is that real people care about real things. They don't care about what's going on CNN right now in the ticker and all of that. They care about, their bread and butter issues at the end of the day. And I think that's what's going to move the needle.
I'm going to.
We have all these real people on here right now.
Yeah, we're going to.
I don't agree. I mean, look, I think there have been these moments, despite our polarized time, where Americans have stopped and watched. And January 6th was one of them. And, January 6th was the moment where the entire country did stop to watch what was happening. And I think there is a sense
right now. When you look at the polls, he is still, none of this has mattered. People know what they know about Donald Trump, and yet he is still winning in the polls in battleground states. I'm going
to a school event of parents of my son's classmates in Manhattan tonight after we finish this. Do you guys think this will be a topic that other parents will bring up? Anybody think they will? Yeah. Yes?
100%, especially when you walk in the room.
We'll see. I'll report back. I want to take everybody's questions and comments. So if you've got one, raise your electronic hand or your physical hand, and we'll bring you in, and the group will kick it around and answer as best we can. So let's go to your questions. When folks are ready, please raise your hand. I want to ask, again, the group, just throw it up to the 4 of you. In our tribal politics now, I suspect Mitt Romney and Liz Cheney will say, the jury did its work and Donald Trump's, whatever. Is there any Republican who might do a man bites dog that will be significant? Will anybody, will there be any surprises there that could matter, or no?
I think that the cadre of people you described will just double down. I can't think of a Republican who's been with him, to Aimee's point, up until now, that would peel away, but it's entirely possible.
I mean, you got to wonder how Nikki Haley is feeling about having let done her endorsement last week. For her voters, I mean, because you talked about, right, the 30% in some states, 17% in others. That goes with the Haley voters, who were really the anti-Trump voters as much as anything. What happens to their sense of betrayal about that? Because clearly a lot of them were never Trumpers. So I don't know. Yeah, I wish Nikki Haley had waited a week. One likes to think she might have gone a different way.
Maybe. Alvin Bragg, who showed restraint in terms of making public statements throughout the trial, is now going to hold a press conference at 6:30. If that starts on time, maybe we'll dip into that. So let's go to questions and comments. My friend Richard Melman, who has been eager to see Donald Trump convicted. I hope, Richard, I'm not mischaracterizing you. Rich, floor is yours. If you could unmute and ask your question or make your comment.
No, you've characterized me correctly, Mark. I was eager to see him convicted, but frankly, I'm blown away. I did not expect him to be convicted, at least at the felony level, to tell you the truth. And I know I've heard your people say, oh, well, normal people don't care about this, and it's, they're worried about real things, not this kind of stuff. I personally think that's not correct. I think this is kind of a big deal, certainly a big deal for the
It's a big deal.
to have had this happen. So I'm not saying it's going to change his numbers, but this is a huge thing for the country.
Tell us why, Rich. What's huge about it? Just, I'm not saying you're wrong.
No,
I just want to hear you enunciate it.
I think this, if you follow this, it really did seem that this was a real trial, that real people were doing it all very well. There was a good judge. The jury seemed, very well picked. The defense was formidable, and so forth. So it all seemed like the trial had the sense of it being kind of the real American way, and this guy's been found guilty by 12 of his peers in a real American way, and I don't think that slides off that easily.
I think you're basically right in sort of the macro contours, but it was a novel case, as Michael Smerconish said earlier, and people have said.
I just think you guys are completely wrong about that. I mean, to me, to say this was a novel case is such in the weeds of kind of legal nitpicking. Nobody in their right minds would take it seriously about that.
Bootstrapping it to a mostly unspecified federal crime was a little bit unorthodox.
It's got nothing to do with it. Just from an overall perception point of view, I mean, he's obviously guilty of having tried to get out of, having this lady sink his election thing. I mean, nobody in their right mind thinks he's not guilty of this. It's just, and for all the pedantry that goes on and all the fine tuning of the legal thing, fine for what it is. But the point is, we leave that to the jury, and the jury said, "Hey, he's guilty as hell," and I agree with them, and I think the country will agree with him. Not the Trump world, but I think in some sense this is really going to have an impact, even if it's not directly measured in the polls.
All right, Rich, thank you.
I do too.
Emily Newberry, floor is yours.
Thank you. What comes across to me is that the big strength that Trump has is his ability to grab the limelight and portray himself as the fighter and the winner. Now he's the loser. So my question is, to what extent he can't get out of the limelight? To what extent will some people start seeing him as the loser? And what effect does that have on
Tim Hogan, thank you
It's
for
funny,
that.
I was thinking about that too as I was walking in for this. The guy we're going to be doing so much winning. He has lost every single case that he's been, he can't win to save his life.
Tim Hogan needs to leave soon. So Tim, I'd love for you to weigh in. Is that a prospect that the veneer of winner and strong and tough and in control is pierced in a meaningful way?
I'm not sure, because I think, he lost an election. He's lost before. I think what's worth noting is that the few times that he has been accountable and dubbed a loser has been when he's been held accountable by ordinary people, by voters, or by jurors. And we have, elites who are Czechs who are completely feckless in his own party who are unable to do so. I think there is something there. And I think ultimately this comes down to, I don't know that his image as a loser matters so much, but for the voters who we dub double haters, whether or not, they're not happy with either candidate, whether or not this breaks through to them as a deal breaker, something that can shift them away from even considering Trump and pulling the lever for Biden. There's such a wide swath of issues that those types of voters have said, he did this, he did that, there was the insurrection, he handled COVID poorly. Is this just another one of those things, or is this something that carries more weight? And I think just from the early indications that we saw from polling this month leading up to this point, it feels different. To your point, we'll see. And I don't think the polls that come out in a week will be definitive on that question. But I think that is the question we should be asking about people's perception of Donald Trump.
Tim, thank you. Thank you for the question. John Cox, unmute, please, and comment or question.
Yeah, I have 2 points that I wanted to make, Mark. And one of them is whether we can stop with the accusing George Soros and having that be considered to be anti-Semitic. That would be like saying you are a Keynesian and you disagree with Milton Friedman, and so you're going to be called an anti-Semite for that as well. I think that is a very shallow and uninformed assertion. The second one is that I think we ought to, I'm a Republican, admittedly. I'm not a huge Trump fan. I was on Haley's committee. But we ought to worry about the future of the democracy when the political system can move over into the legal realm, and you can use this, as Michael Smerconish said, you can use a bookkeeping misdemeanor to go after someone. You know, I get it that people don't like them. I don't either. But you decide those things at the ballot box, and I worry about our democracy when we start to bring the criminal justice system, and I worry about the respect for the criminal justice system as well as for the democracy.
John,
I just have
you.
to take the one on, I got to take the Soros thing.
Yeah.
I got to take it. Because it's absolutely the definition of anti-Semitism.
Be a peacemaker, Lauren. Let me ask you this.
I know.
Can you criticize George Soros without being accused of being anti-Semitic? Is it possible?
Not when the trope, which has been repeated over and over again, is that it is a wealthy Jew who is behind an effort to delegitimize his presidency, and that all things on the left are being funded by the wealthy Jew.
You never said I'm a wealthy Jew.
How about just a wealthy guy who supports really liberal causes?
I could name 40 other wealthy guys who indeed are supporting Biden who never get mentioned because they're not Jewish. There is a well-documented trope that Soros has been targeted. It has been tracked extensively.
It's true, but that doesn't mean that everybody.
A question of opinion.
But that doesn't mean that everybody who criticizes him is being anti-Semitic. Just because some people employ him that way.
Well, we're not talking about everybody. We're talking about this particular instance of blaming George Soros for the fact that he was just found guilty by a jury in New York City. Those things go together. So,
all right, my attempts to peacemake on that are going to fail. John, thank you. Tom, that's all right. Tom Rogers.
Yay, Tom.
Thank you. What I'm going to be fascinated by, and I think what will keep this in the news through July 11th, is the sentencing.
Yeah.
And what kind of jail sentencing may be involved here. It's hard to believe that the judge won't impose a jail sentence of some kind, because I think that the acts of contempt going into it were, in addition to the 34 counts, anybody else would probably be sentenced to jail. I cannot see him, however, imposing a jail sentence that would interfere with the presidential campaign. But that leaves the issue of delaying the sentence until after the election and turns whether or not you believe Donald Trump should go to jail into a major campaign issue. And I think the dynamics of that are going to be fascinating in terms of how it keeps this issue alive.
So I agree with everything you said. I think that the left, the right will be more inflamed by a jail sentence than the left will be energized by it, is my sense. Could be wrong. And obviously we care what undecideds in the battleground states want. But to me, a lot of this goes to the question of, do Americans, again, undecided voters in the battleground states, feel like Rich Melman does, that this was a just verdict? Or do they feel that this was a bull case with a Manhattan jury convicting someone on a political basis? And I don't know the answer to that.
I think that will pale in comparison to the issue of what the sentencing is, because I think this will all get characterized as, do you believe he should go to jail or not?
But do you think but Tom, just to clarify,
whether you think it was,
do you think that's a winning issue for the Democrats if he gets a sentence?
No, not necessarily. I agree with you. It will energize the right more than it will the left. But I do think the issue of how it plays to the 800,000 people in the blue wall states is going to be absolutely critical, and I don't have a view on that.
Yeah. Michael Smerconish, what do you think of the question of, will the verdict be seen as just? Got to unmute, Michael.
It depends, by whom. I think that it's going to keep us exactly where we are right now. I think it'll be an energizing. I mean, I did what I'm sure a lot of you did as soon as it came in, which was to pull out the remote and immediately go through the scroll and see the reaction. Fox is nothing short of inflamed. It was Jeanine Pirro on a rant, and I'm sure that's going to be great for the base. But it all comes down to just 6 states and how it's perceived by a very narrow band of people. And I don't know the answer, is what I would say. Can I make one other point so that my record is clear on this? I think he slept with her. I think that he paid her. And I think that he paid her with an eye toward the election. I have no doubt about any of that. I'm hung up as a lawyer in the weeds on how it got done. I believe that O.J. Simpson killed Nicole Brown Simpson and Ron Goldman. It never sat well with me that he did 7 or 8 years in Las Vegas. Now, nobody wants to be an advocate for O.J. Simpson, and I feel similarly about this case. Whether anybody else gets into the pool so deep, I doubt it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Lots of hands up, and I want to try to get to lots of folks. Bragg may come out. Again, we're going to at least dip into that to see what that's like when he starts. But let's just go through those folks with your hands up. Short comment or question if you can, and to get Aimee and Lauren and Michael back in, and we've got some other folks joining I want to hear from. So Roger Baskin, you first, please.
Yes, this morning, Mark Halperin was on Michael Smuckadish's show, and I think Halperin's the best political analyst in the country, and I think Smuckadish has the best radio show in America. But anyway, there was speculation that Joe Biden would drop out of the race because of cognitive decline. My question is, does this make this more or less likely?
I would say less likely, but, and thank you for your kind words about that. Michael's show is excellent. I have no comment on myself. I think less likely, because I think that at a minimum, even if the swing voters don't care about this, at a minimum, this will energize Democrats. This will give Democrats something to talk about that's different than Biden's current poll numbers. And just to be clear, I don't think he's going to drop out. I think he might, but I don't think he's going to, at least at this point. Let's keep going through, and I'm continuing to watch for Bragg. Janet Lane, unmute, please. Question or comment?
My comment is, I'm an independent leaning towards a fiscal conservative opinion. That do people realize how the justice system in this country has been weaponized? Whether it's against Trump or it's against or the sweetheart deal that Biden's son got, it bothers me. It bothers me tremendously, especially to the young people, young adults, young people in this country. I think it is up to the commentators to address this.
Are you voting for Trump?
No.
No.
I don't know who I'm voting for. I'm hoping that somehow there'll be 2 others.
Okay.
Somehow.
All right. Jonathan Davis, unmute, please.
Hello. So, yeah, I think my comment is I am a conservative. I am probably going to vote for Trump, but I also think this is a comparison race. So, yeah, Trump is convicted. Okay, but you have to, a voter will look at who's the alternative. Okay, so because Donald Trump is not maybe the most moral person around, which is kind of baked in already, am I going to switch my vote to someone who has has his own vulnerabilities and has not done a great job while in office, in my opinion? So I think because it's a comparison, both candidates have their weaknesses, which is why I don't think this really is going to matter in any way.
Thank you for that. Ray.
I mean, one thing that's going to come out, I just want to say this, Mark, one thing that's going to come out is that under federal law, if you're a convicted felon, you can't vote in the state where Trump currently resides, which is in Florida. He cannot get security clearances under most circumstances. And there are going to be questions about whether or not he can travel to foreign countries as a convicted felon. So any other felon in the United States would be subject to those things. And I think it becomes a real question in that comparative point that you make, can he actually serve in any effective way as president as a convicted felon? More to come on that.
Yeah, although obviously there'll be an appeals process and he may not be a convicted felon by the end of that. Ray, go ahead.
Hi, Mark. Hi, everybody. 1 month from now, right before the first debate, what is the bigger story or storyline? Trump's guilty verdict, Trump's conviction, or Biden's acuity?
Well, there's one more to add to it based on the timing of the sentencing, which is Trump's running mate, right? Trump could name his running mate on right around the time he's convicted or he's sentenced and overshadow that. Aimee, what do you think? The answer to that question is what's the biggest story?
I mean, it depends on who you ask. And I think both sides will make the case. I think it's interesting. I didn't find Trump's statement today surprising at all. I felt like he was going to come out and say everything was rigged. He had been saying that all along. I don't think that that's going to sway. I think he's making the case. And one thing that Trump is very good at is that he is good at persuading. He's good at branding. So he's already kind of laying those tracks, like, this isn't, and making the case that, this court, this is, this was rigged. All of this is not, this was all like not, this was all meant to go against me. And I think that he's going to continue to do that. I think that when you look at what is going to happen, though, ultimately, is that people are going to look at where they are right now. As I mentioned before, they're going to look at their own personal situations and evaluate. And where I think Biden has failed is that he hasn't made the case on where the country is going. People don't feel good about where the country is going right now. And they don't know. He's accomplished so much, and yet when you even ask Democrats, they can't even mention. When you ask your run-of-the-mill Democrat, they don't know what he's done. And so he's going to have to continue to make the case. And I think the mental acuity thing will obviously be a big part of people's decision on who they vote for and whether or not they feel like they were better off 4 years ago.
Thank you. I was told that both Meghan McCain and Melissa DeRosa are on, and I don't see them. Are either of you on? And if so, could you unmute, turn your cameras on, and tell us what we should think? I'll give both you ladies a chance. I don't see either of you, but if you're there, we'd love you to weigh in. Megan, there you go. Megan, what do you think?
Hi. Sorry, I'm in my daughter's nursery.
Hi, Megan.
Hi. Look, you're not going to like what I have to say. I'm spending like $2,700 on groceries every month. I have 2 young kids. It's a lot, even for me, and my husband and I are gainfully employed. My girlfriends who are married to like military guys and work minimum wage jobs are suffering in a way that I have not seen in my adult time. One of my girlfriends just told me a story how she's buying like off-brand peanut butter instead of Jif. That's the stuff that I actually care about the most right now. And I don't know if that makes me a cliche. I really just want like interest rates to come down and groceries to be less expensive and for people to feel more hopeful about the future. And I don't think Trump or Biden is bringing us there, but I don't know what that makes me. But like, even when this happened tonight, my main concern is still just like, my friends are really hurting and I don't know what to do about it because I can't make groceries less expensive and I can't make gas less expensive. And, I have friends who've been working their whole life that want to buy a house and they can't because of and the interest rates and inflation. So that when you're talking about people in Milwaukee, I'm in Virginia, but that's my main concern right now. And I really hope that the Biden administration would actually listen, because every time Karine Jean-Pierre goes on TV and basically says this is not an issue and it's not happening, it infuriates me. And I think that I agree with you, Mr. Smirkanish, that I definitely think he slept with Stormy Daniels and he paid him off for the election. But I also think that it was a court filled with liberals who were out to get him. And I'm sure he's guilty of the crime, but I too am uncomfortable the way it's stacked, just as a conservative. Like, where does this road lead? And it's just this whole entire mess. And I'm sorry I don't have better analysis. I wasn't expecting to talk. I just came on to listen.
Oh, all right.
But
well,
honestly, like
talking.
Groceries prices are the number one thing. And it gives me like active anxiety all the time.
Megan,
that's what I hear mostly when I talk to people like you. And that's why I'm so firm on my belief that the economy is going to be the big issue, because people care most about that right now.
Megan, thank you, and Aimee, thank you. Doug Workman had his hand up before, and he's an attorney, and he's usually got pretty interesting ideas. So, Doug, what do you want to say or ask?
Well, I'm still kind of with the same thing that Michael was saying, and that is that I'm very confused about how this can be, wouldn't be set aside on appeal, because all the rulings in the case seem to be going in the favor of the prosecution, which is unusual in a criminal case.
Yeah, well, it's possible that the appellate judges will be just as biased as the trial judge was. It's still New York, so that's one possibility. And of course, the appeal won't happen until after the election, to the extent being a convicted felon and with a sentence of jail time or not matters to swing voters. Trump won't be saved except by the promise or possibility of overturning on appeal after the election.
By the way, I echo the person who said that you're just like the best programming that we could get, and Michael is the best radio thing. Just got to say that while I'm on.
All right, very nice of you. Thank you, Michael. Glad you could bask in praise, because you don't get enough of it. Mayhel Fowler, unmute please. Question or comment? Still waiting for DA Bragg, and I haven't gone to watch cable with us all together because I'm watching it out of the corner of my eye, and there's nothing interesting happening on cable. At least not as interesting as this. Mayhel Fowler, go ahead.
Yes, I just had to say, here, Meghan McCain, because you read the news and the Biden administration says things are going well economically. But the people I know and people in my family, yes, they cannot afford to buy groceries or gas. Things are incredibly expensive for ordinary Americans. So I think that will be a huge issue. Immigration, too. And to the question of whether or not people will peel away from Trump because he's a convicted felon, the miasma of sex around the whole case, we've had that before with John Kennedy, with Bill Clinton. I think as a nation, when we don't get on our puritanical, huffy high horse, we're inured to that. People who are, big followers of Trump will pull away if he becomes poor. I think if he's no longer successful, that will be the ticket. Okay. But that will be the only thing, in my opinion.
Mayhel, thank you.
Back to you, Mark.
Thank you. Speaker Gingrich is here, and I didn't notice that he was on. Thanks for prompting me. Mr. Speaker, what do you think? Is this matter for voters or not?
Well, I think three things, basically. One, it is going to radically increase the anger on the right. I mean, people I know who are sort of semi-interested this evening are furious and think the whole thing is a direct threat. And if they can destroy a billionaire presidential nominee who's been president, they can destroy anybody. And I was surprised. Some of the people who said that to me in the last 2 hours, who were just literally stunned. I mean, they can't imagine that we've become a country like that. So I think the biggest effect on the right will be an enormous increase in anger and determination to win this fall, and to pose it as either we win or a dictatorship takes over, because that's how the Biden people are behaving. Second, I think that the comments that Meghan made are 100% right. By September, people are not going to be talking about Donald Trump's legal status. They're going to be talking about the price of everything, and they're going to blame Biden on all of it. And third, the question is, as you pointed out in your newsletter this morning, how rapidly does Biden's decay continue? I mean, there is a point here where watching him stumble around a stage and saying to yourself, it's the Jimmy Carter problem. You really want 4 more years? And I think as people sort of project that, it really becomes very different than the mood at the trial at the very end. And I think Trump, frankly, gained enormously by the sheer capacity to endure. I mean, the number of people have said to me they cannot imagine how he has gone through this and is still standing and is still moving forward. And in that sense, he's a much bigger person today than he was when that trial started.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for that. If you could have your day off tomorrow and I bought you a plane ticket anywhere in the country and you could talk to anybody you wanted about what they thought about the trial, where would you go and what would you ask?
I wouldn't actually care. I think in the long run, what matters here is that people are rendering a judgment about the sickness of the system. So you can go anyway. Since you like swing states, go to Michigan, Go to Wisconsin. Wisconsin's probably the best because it has the most liberal culturally background of all the swing states, and therefore is the most likely to say, well, the system really did work, and Trump's probably a bad guy. But even there, I think he's now probably, that his side has probably gained an enormous amount of energy in the last few hours. And it's just the sort of sense of, how could you do this in America? But I would say Wisconsin probably be the best place.
So if you walked into a diner in Waukesha, Wisconsin.
By the way, it's also my wife's home state.
No, I know.
And my son-in-law's home state, so you can go.
They'd
love to see you in Sheboygan.
What would you ask people in a Sheboygan diner to gauge whether they cared about this? What would you ask them?
I just ask them, do you think it was right, and does it worry you?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I wouldn't ask them about Trump. I'd ask them about themselves.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Very grateful to you for joining. Feel free to continue to participate. Patty, unmute, please. Ask question, comment.
Hi, I am definitely a never Trumper Democrat who, because of President Biden's behavior post October 7th in Israel, not so much immediately after, but I'm living in California, so it doesn't really matter, but I will not vote for him. And I don't know if I would vote for Trump, but this does not change anything. I think, anyone knows who he is and is not surprised by anything that he would do that's immoral but this really does seem like a ridiculous trial and completely unnecessary.
Patty, hold on one second. Thank you for that. Stay with us. Let's listen to Bragg at a press conference in Manhattan.
Also going to obviously impact the political calendar. We'll see if it impacts.
Step forward.
Good evening. First and foremost, I want to thank the jury for its service. Jurors perform a fundamental civic duty. Their service is literally the cornerstone of our judicial system. We should all be thankful for the careful attention that this jury paid to the evidence and the law and their time and commitment over these past several weeks. 12 everyday New Yorkers, and of course our alternates, heard testimony from 22 witnesses, including former and current employees of the defendant, media executives, book publishers, custodians of records, and others. They reviewed call logs, text messages, and emails. They heard recordings. They saw checks and invoices, bank statements, and calendar appointments. This type of white-collar prosecution is core to what we do at the Manhattan District Attorney's Office. In the 1930s, District Attorney Thomas Dewey ushered in the era of the modern, independent professional prosecutor. For now nearly 90 years, dedicated professionals in this office have built upon that fine tradition. A major part of our practice during that nearly 90 years has been public integrity work, including cases involving jurists, local and state electeds, public servants, and others. I want to thank this phenomenal prosecution team, embodying the finest traditions of this office: professionalism, integrity, dedication, and service. They are model public servants, and I am proud and humbled to serve side by side with them. The 12 everyday jurors vowed to make a decision based on the evidence and the law, and the evidence and the law alone. Their deliberations led them to a unanimous conclusion beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant, Donald J. Trump, is guilty of 34 counts of falsifying business records in the first degree to conceal a scheme to corrupt the 2016 election. And while this defendant may be unlike any other in American history, we arrived at this trial and ultimately today at this verdict in the same manner as every other case that comes through the courtroom doors, by following the facts and the law and doing so without fear or favor. I want to conclude by expressing deep gratitude to the NYPD and the officers of the Office of Court Administration for securing the courthouse, all of our safety, making sure the courthouse and all of the other matters that are important in their own right continued seamlessly. They will continue to be and have always been incredible partners. Thank you.
And do you plan to request a prison sentence for this conviction? And do you think that Donald Trump's multiple violations of the gag order that was in place should factor into that request at all?
The judge scheduled a sentencing for July 11th. We will speak in court in that time. He also set a motion schedule. We will speak in our court filings as we've done throughout this proceeding.
Donald Trump has repeatedly targeted you personally and members of your prosecution team. Do you have a response to the former president after this trial is concluded?
I do not.
Out in February, when you decided not to bring cases
This is brilliant so far.
you criticized that. You criticized when you vetted him.
It's not grandstanding.
You criticized when
Choosing to argue as prosecutors should through the court, through motions. Really smart and right.
I did my job. Our job is to follow the facts and the law without fear or favor. And that's exactly what we did here. And what I feel is just gratitude to work alongside phenomenal public servants who do that each and every day in matters that you all write about and make the press, and in lots of matters that you don't. I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
Last, Mr. Steinglass, many people said the prosecution was masterful and flawless. Just want to know how you feel at this moment. Sorry.
I'll let you vent.
How do you feel?
Mr. Steinglass, I think some of you probably saw him speak for a little bit the other day. So he's done his job, as has this team. And he just told me, tell him how I feel. I think you said that. I will just say just enormous gratitude. You know, our system, I talk about the jurors at the beginning of my remarks. We have a phenomenal system. 12 everyday New Yorkers. They listen to the judge's directions. They follow the evidence. You saw them in court every day. They were careful and attentive. And so I feel deep gratitude to work alongside them, to be a part of this system. And I just want to echo that this is what we're doing every single day. I mean, during this trial, just this week, right, a ghost gun indictment, Grimaldi's wage theft.
We can dump out of this. I think masterful done from a PR point of view. Very smart, staying away from anything inflammatory. I see here in Fox in the lower third, Todd Blanche will be on Jesse Waters primetime as Michael Cohen is on MSNBC. So have your split screen ready. It's 7 of. I want to follow up with Patty with one question, and then I want to. We've got a number of hands raised. I want to see how many people we can get to before the top of the hour when we'll conclude, and we'll be back soon. Patty, I'm just wondering. You suggested you didn't think this was like the best legal case of all time, despite the jury's verdict. I'm just wondering what you think was wrong with this as a prosecution.
I just think it's something politicians do all the time is, these sort of borderline, do this, don't do that with finance. And it's about a porn star. And I just don't care. I care about the documents that he had hidden in Mar-a-Lago.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty important, but this is just ridiculous.
Okay, Patty, thank you. That's really interesting. Thank you. Steve Guest, unmute and go ahead.
Yes, I would like to, something I haven't heard yet, but I watched like Fox Man on the Street type questions with the African American. They seem to think that this is a railroad, and you think that this could help with the African American crowd if Trump plays up that this is an unjust, legal system.
They're certainly going to try. I don't know if they will. I don't know if Michael or Aimee or anybody else wants to weigh in on that.
I mean, many African Americans find that implication incredibly offensive and have been speaking about it because it is the implication that because you're Black, somehow you have been part of the criminal justice system, and it is pretty reductive. And there are other reasons perhaps why there is some erosion of support in the African American community for Biden and some moves towards Trump. I do not think that is one reason.
I'd like to respond to that. I spent my afternoon, you probably can't see it because it's muted, but reading Charlemagne de God's book because he's my guest on CNN Saturday. And I have been wrestling with exactly this issue. It's kryptonite. How do I ask this in a non-offensive way? Because I think it's a valid issue to raise, and I don't know how else. I understand inflation. I understand broken promises, but I don't know how else to explain that his standing among folks of color is at 22%. And my God, if you cut that in half, there's something really significant going on. And I think as a white suburban guy, maybe with no credentials, I think there has to be something to the perception by some that they've been victimized by the system forever. And maybe he's being victimized in a similar fashion. So it's out there, and this is not a plug to watch, but I am going to ask something about it. I don't know how the hell I'm going to do it.
All right, Michael, thank you.
But I'm just saying that these are men on the street type interviews coming from the community itself.
Yeah, although Fox, like everyone else, edits their man on the street interviews, so it's not like a free live stream. Let me move on, just because, again, I want to try to get a few more folks in. Hank Morris, please unmute and go ahead.
Mark, so 3 quick points. You asked what would be covered on Monday. I think the right question is to ask whether Donald Trump will have stopped talking about all this by Monday.
Right.
And I doubt it.
Not in his fundraising emails, at least.
No, but when you put a microphone in front of him.
Yeah, I agree. It'll be a centerpiece of every rally.
Second, I thought he seemed very weak and whiny tonight, and has over a period of time, which goes against his brand, not just the losing brand, but the winning brand, but the strength brand. And then the third thing, if the Democrats are smart, they're going to context this, and you're going to hear a framing, which is Donald Trump's not worried about you. Donald Trump's not worried about your gasoline prices. He's worried about staying out of jail.
Right. Hank, thank you. Awesome. A couple more. Jeffrey Bush, go ahead. Unmute and go ahead.
Well, thank you, Mark. I appreciate that. Kind of a comment and a question or opinion from the guests here. Comment is, I think an amalgamation of Speaker Gingrich and Meghan McCain is really the story that'll come out of this thing long term. That's really what's going to win the election, is the economy of my wallet, not the Bidenomics and so forth. That's the comment. The question is, we talked about 17% of Republicans suggesting they won't vote for Trump if he's convicted of a felony. I've said that's hogwash all along. I think the number's 3 or 4%. But the question I have is that 3 to 4%, if it's spread across those swing states, that can be a big difference. And so I just wanted the opinion of the host.
I know Aimee is skeptical that it'll decide the election. And Lauren is I think more in the view that it might. I'll be curious to see. I'm eager to figure out in the next couple days a way to try to measure whether this is going to impact people. And I really do think to some extent it will depend on how people are thinking about it next week. Donald Trump has survived a lot of things that people thought would take him down. I think that there's a school of thought that's not unreasonable that says that this is a different type of thing. But I'm not sure how much Americans, particularly the ones that Meghan and the speaker talked about, how much they'll see this as a different type of thing that rises to a higher level than Access Hollywood, a higher level than being impeached twice by the House, etc.
I agree with you. Those voters are taken.
Yeah.
I'm suggesting those true
Yeah.
double haters,
Yeah.
those true never Trumpers.
Yeah.
Will that 3%, that 4% in these swing states that are razor thin?
That would decide the race for sure.
Yeah.
Bernadette. Thank you, Jeffrey. Bernadette, unmute, please.
Hey, Mark, thank you. I'm actually going to be going out campaigning, canvassing at around 5:30 tonight. I knock on every door.
Tell people which battleground state you live in.
I live in Arizona.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, and I'm in Congressional District 8 against, Blake Masters and everything. I'm running for a different seat right now. But the Republicans, it's not going to change. I don't know where that 3 or 4% is. It's baked in. As far as what Megan had mentioned, Alex and I sold our last truck. We're out of the trucking business. Bidenomics is not working. I've said that before. And this trial, it'll just reinforce what Republicans think. A lot of Democrats, including myself, think it was kind of bullshit that it came up now. As someone else mentioned, the documents down in Mar-a-Lago is a much bigger deal. But from what I'm hearing from voters, it's not going to change anything. And Democrat voters are really worried.
Okay. Bernadette, thank you. It's 7 Eastern. I want to stop. We try to always start and end on time, but I appreciate Bernadette and Michael and Aimee and Tim, who was with us earlier, and Lauren and everyone else who spoke and participated. As I said, I watch cable out of the corner of my eye. Much, at least for me, this is a much better hour spent than it would have been flipping around watching predictable guests saying predictable things. So very grateful to you. Sorry for those who are looking forward to Rick Grinnell. We will have him back and talk about foreign policy at some point soon. And we'll be back with you with some more two ways in the aftermath of this historic verdict before too long. Thank you again for participating. Have a good night, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Mark.